Welcome, everybody. It is the Sko Show from Mile High Sports. I'm Shawn Drotar. That's Matt Smith. Obviously, for the Buffaloes, a big game. We start Big 12 play in a game against Houston. The Houston Cougars started out 2-0. Of course, the Buffs finish off Delaware, a team they were supposed to win. And Matt, well, the interesting part about this was the quarterback discussion. We knew that Julian Lewis was going to get a shot in this game with Delaware. He most certainly did. But then, surprisingly, Ryan Staub, the ostensible third-string quarterback, did get his shot. And it turns out that in many ways, even though his stint was comparatively brief, 7 for 10 passing, 2 touchdowns, including a decisive drive at the end of the first half. Deion Sanders made it clear after the game, Staub don't trip. And now Staub probably expected to start this game against Houston.
Yeah, it was not expected, not on anybody's bingo card, and certainly nothing that I think they had really even anticipated, despite what the company line might have been after the game. So, Coach Prime is a field coach. He goes by his gut and he goes by intuition. And certainly Ryan Staub, having had now year 3 in the program, there's a comfortability factor there. And quite frankly, I don't know that Caden Salter has lost his job, but in his 2 opportunities so far, I don't think he won it. And when you look at what Ryan Staub was able to do, 4 drives, 3 touchdown drives, Colorado's going to have to score points to win games this year. And when they've gotten above 30, if I'm not mistaken, in the Coach Prime era, they're undefeated so far. So I think in their minds, it's who's going to allow us the most consistent opportunity to score points and who's going to allow us to open up our offense. And if Caden Salter's not able to get the ball outside the numbers, and truthfully, if you look at the talent on this team, it's the receiver room where the talent still is, even without Travis and LeJontay and Jimmy and Will. It's still that room that is reloaded, and it's certainly better than their running back room. So I think there was a little bit of a crisis of intention in that maybe they leaned in too hard to the RPO when they recruited the dual threat guy, when in reality, that's not really where their team was built. It was still built outside in, as Coach Prime talked about when he first got here. And I think it played out on the field. Now, you had Ryan Staub come in who has some experience. It's not like he's completely inexperienced, but this is a guy who, quite frankly, really hasn't had a big volume of opportunities, and the ones that he has gotten, he's looked pretty good so far. And I think there's a more of a trust factor there with him. So moving forward, I do anticipate him to start on Friday. How long that lasts, what that looks like, I don't know, but that's at least where we are right now, sitting here a day before the game.
Yeah, the interesting part about the Staub situation, right? I've talked about this with Pat Shurmur being the offensive coordinator. Not a lot of history of him being a play caller for dual threat quarterbacks. And when you're talking about the idea of grabbing guys that succeed off the RPO like Caden Salter, and I think you make a good point. He really isn't doing anything to lose the job. He's completed nearly 70% of his passes. He has 1 touchdown through the air, 2 on the ground. Hasn't had the turnovers. So there's really not much you look at and say, wow, he shouldn't be the quarterback anymore. But yeah, it feels very much as if the way that the Buffs functioned with Staub in the pocket there was much more effective. It gave time to get the wide receivers open. The pocket was immediately not only better, but when you're not dealing with a quarterback that moves around a lot like Staub doesn't, it was able to hold blocks for longer. Just the offense looked as if it functioned as designed better with Staub. And I look at that and think, okay, that makes sense. In this case, that would be that's a really tough break for Caden Salter, who started transferred here, assuming he'd be the starter, and then could spend 1 more year trying to build his resume towards maybe playing on Sundays. But if you have to go ahead and win games as well, right? So you have to find a way to win games. So to do that, you have to worry about who's going to get you a win today. I can see the argument for Staub over Salter, and I don't think the leash will be very long. Obviously, if he doesn't play very well, you're going to go back to a guy that's got more experience than Salter. But my question, Matt, has to do more. What does this do with Julian Lewis, a guy that is a bit, not to Salter's extent, but a bit of a dual threat quarterback himself, the top overall recruited quarterback out of high school coming into this cycle? He's not ready this year. That part's not surprising. And you and I even talked about this before the opener against Georgia Tech. It's sort of the Arch Manning plan, right? Be behind a guy that's got experience for 1 year. Go ahead and put some weight on, get to at least be a bigger guy, learn a little bit, and then the keys to the castle are yours in 2026. But all of a sudden, with Staub starting, maybe that plants some seeds of doubt in Julian Lewis's mind. So all of a sudden now, how do you thread this needle for the Buffs? How do you win games this year? Get yourself to a bowl in what is going to be a transition year, and one that Deion Sanders is fully aware. If he doesn't, the narrative is going to be about, see, he doesn't have Travis Hunter, he doesn't have Shedeur Sanders, he doesn't have his kids, so he's not that good a coach. He's, of course, incentivized to get to a bowl game. So you have to do whatever you can to win 6 games. But you also need to make sure that you're keeping Julian Lewis ready to go, because you look at him as being the future of the program. How do you do both at the same time?
I'm less concerned about that second part, and I don't think Coach Prime is right now either, because his goal is to win as many games as possible this year. In their heads, they think they're still an 8-9 win team, which I don't agree with. But I don't think they're really worried about that, because you brought something up there. Well, it's like, naturally you assume next year, okay, here's Julian Lewis, and you hand him the keys. If they still feel he's not ready, then they will not give him the keys. Just because he came in as a 5-star and they paid him a lot of money, Coach Prime will only play guys that he really trusts in, and especially at that position. And I think it says a lot about what they feel about Caden Salter and the fact that they did play 3 quarterbacks. They're not 100% sold. They can see some of the writing on the wall with him. This is a level change. He's a 5th-year guy. It should look cleaner. Like he didn't necessarily lose a job, but it should look cleaner than it is right now, and it's not. And I think they're struggling to trust him as a runner and a passer. But for Julian, I think you explain to him, because he is a mature young man with a very good family, what the situation is. And one thing that Coach Prime was adamant about when they received the commitment from Julian and when they recruited Caden was, nobody's being promised anything here. You are just being promised an opportunity to compete. So if you can come into camp and beat out the other guys, then you're going to win the job. But I don't believe that they're all that concerned about making sure his feelings aren't hurt and keeping him interested so he doesn't hit the portal. If for some reason Julian transferred, they would just go find somebody else. That's kind of the nature of college football. While I think he's an exciting prospect, I don't believe that he is in like the top 5 of their biggest concerns at the moment.
Now, that may be the case, because this is an interesting way of doing it, right? If you were, for example, Texas with Arch Manning, right? And let's say Arch Manning had a beef with the plan last year with Quinn Ewers, and he decided to transfer out. I get that. Even though that's Arch Manning, I get that at least a program like Texas would be like, we're still Texas.
Right.
There are people lining up to take that role. If you want to transfer out Arch Manning, go ahead. We'll find somebody else. And I get that. But at Colorado, while this is still rebuilding a program, and especially if they don't win 8 or 9 games, and I'm with you, I don't think they're that kind of team, and don't get to a bowl, then it's not as easy for CU to go ahead and turn around and say, we'll just grab another 5-star quarterback. Yeah, Texas can do that, but I'm not sure Colorado can.
Yeah, and again, I think that if that were the case and Julian were to leave, $1 million would come off the books, and you just go give that to some other transfer. I hear you. At some point, money does become a factor, and there's plenty of guys out there who would want that. So again, I'm not really all that worried about how Julian feels about the plan. I don't think they care about what his feelings are about the plan, quite frankly. If you have to coddle him right now, then you made the wrong selection, because in Coach Prime's program, it really is a meritocracy. Like, I think there's a lot of people that have the wrong opinion. There's a reason Cash Cleveland, who was a freshman walk-on, last year, who didn't take a single snap with the first team, started halfway through the season when Hank Zelinskas couldn't go. If you can play, they're going to put you out there. It doesn't matter where you came from, how many stars, what they paid you. They're about to go to Ryan Staub in game 3, and he's the one guy that they're not paying of that room, right? So I'm not sure that they even really are concerned about that. And quite frankly, I don't think that they're in a position where they can waste time being worried about that. If that was the case, then just start Julian and just let him go through the fire and have the ups and downs, and don't even worry about it. I think it would almost be hypocritical to be incredibly concerned about what is going to happen next year, and really overlooking everything that they've said about this year. I mean, Coach Prime has said repeatedly that this is a better team than last year, which I don't agree with. I've never agreed with. And I said it the very first time that he brought that up, that I think that's insulting to last year's group, quite frankly. However, they're very much a year by year program. There's 38 guys in this roster who are in their final year of eligibility, and that leads the country. They're focused on 2025 right now.
And I guess that's a fair point. To you might have won me over on this, Matt, because I do get the idea at least that if Julian Lewis, for example, had an issue, it's like, hey, we're clearly our objective is if you can help us win on Saturday or on Friday in this case,
Right.
we're going to play you. We don't care where you came from. We don't care if we recruited you. We don't care what your stars are. We don't care about any of that. We feel like on this next game, that's the best player to help us. And I can see the argument of saying that if at any point this season, Juju, that's you, believe me, we're going to start you because if we think you give us the best chance to win a game, we'll do it. And the counterpoint to that, it's always been that way in any sport. If for some reason you're right, you're worried too much about coddling him and saying, oh, you know what? Let's say hypothetically, Caden Salter, of course, moves on, and Ryan Staub decides to stay as he finishes the year as the starter. Ryan Staub is a sophomore. At this point, and I love it. Now we have to stop just categorizing. I get it, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, but who knows what that means? He's a third-year sophomore now with the program. And if you come back in the spring and say, hey, we're opening this up to competition like we do all the time, and hypothetically Julian Lewis decides to transfer out, then, yeah, the reality is he probably wasn't your guy anyway. If you're afraid of basically saying, I don't want to be handed the job, I want to take the job,
right.
If that's not your mindset, then maybe you're not the person to lead the program.
I couldn't agree with you more, and that's definitely how they feel. The only time that I think the Julian Lewis conversation comes up the rest of the year is in the final 3 games. If you are out of reach of making a bowl, or maybe like, I don't know, what would it be, like 3 and 6 at that stage? Then I think you look at that, because then you would still, if Julian doesn't play again, you can play 4 games and maintain your redshirt year. Now, by the time Julian's a senior, you probably have a rule change in college football where you get 5 years of eligibility no matter what at some point. That's probably coming down the line. But until we get there, I don't think you can afford to play it fast and loose with the red shirt, because the truth is Julian's an undersized guy anyway, and he was supposed to be entering his senior year of high school this year. He's not even a legal adult yet. He doesn't turn 18 until September 21st. So there is so much room to grow and so much to learn for him that they knew that coming in, and that's why they went and got Caden Salter. And you brought up how Caden Salter was going to come here to start. That wasn't what was promised to him either. It was only, here's an opportunity to compete. And after the down year he had at Liberty, quite frankly, to get this kind of an opportunity, I think was somewhat lucky for him. Especially with this much exposure and this much attention on him. So the other thing that Coach Prime is not going to let you do is go out there and embarrass him if he can help it. And I think there was part of it where they are really frustrated with some of the elements of the offense. They can't trust him to tuck and run right now because he's not making the best decisions in the ground. They can't trust him to throw because he's missing layups and he's missing plays he should hit through the air, despite having a solid completion percentage. But you'll notice at the beginning of the Delaware game, a lot of what they did was change the offense. You saw a lot more hitches, drags, inside slants, shorter route combinations, because Colorado doesn't have the offensive line to drop back and let him hit his third progression and sit in the pocket for 5-6 seconds and deliver a strike. That's just not who the Buffs are. I think Coach Prime would have liked that to be the case had they been able to more successfully rebuild their offensive line. But I think their line is marginally better. I'm not sure it's all that much better right now. So they're still in the information gathering section of their schedule, and entering conference play, they are not where they expected to be or want to be as a team on either side of the football. Special teams is the only area where I would say they've probably surpassed expectations so far. So like I said, I think there's just a lot more on the table than what happens at quarterback. And when you look at their offense, I think it's pretty simple. If you take every quarterback away and you just look running back room, wide receiver room, where is your talent? It's outside. And Caden Salter was not able in the first two games to consistently get those guys the football. So you look at what Ryan Staub did in 4 drives. You look at the way the team rallied around him. And I think if you're Coach Prime, you see some of the writing on the wall that this isn't a world-beating team, that you're going to need to find a different way than you're currently doing it if you want to have some sort of success this year in conference. And you look at what Ryan Staub has done, and you ride that wave. And to your point, if it doesn't work out, He gets the gong, you go back to Salter, and you go forward. Like I think the difference between the two really is negligible anyway. I don't think there's that much of a difference. I think it's just play style.
Yeah, and obviously we'll find out more about that as we get into this game. I want to remind you that the Sko Show is brought to you by our friends at Peckish, the wonderful 2-location spot for wings and pizza and beer. Everything, that goes pretty well with football, right? Couple of locations in the Denver Tech Center at the Bellevue Station, and then the brand new expanded location on the hill in Boulder. Of course, it's been on the hill. They just moved down a little bit now. 3 times as large, by the way. Best Wings in Boulder County 2024. Happy hour 7 days a week from 3 to 6. $3 slices of pizza, discounted beer and spirits. Make sure you check out our preferred dining partner of CU Athletics. I know I love it. I know the members of the Buffs love it. Coach Prime has loved it, and you will too. So go check them out over at the Hill, or if you haven't had a chance or you're familiar with them at the Hill, they are down in Metro Denver too, Denver Tech Center, Bellevue Station. Give them a try. We're delighted to be sponsored by our friends at Peckish. Matt, let's touch a little bit on the defensive side. We touched about the offensive side, and I think there are interesting things to break down in this game, including not only the likely quarterback switch, but I think we've also learned much about the running backs and about the wide receivers we'll get into in a bit. But let's talk about the defense. Obviously, they gave up more than 300 yards on the ground to Georgia Tech in that loss. You can't do that. It got a lot better against Delaware, but then again, not to quote Wayne's World too much, but look, Delaware. When you look at the defensive side of things, now that you're getting into Big 12 play, you're talking about explosive offenses left and right. There is talent on the defense, obviously, for the Buffs, but when you look at how it's manifested in the first couple of games, it's very hard to get a read on it from what they surrendered against Georgia Tech, and then you look at a Delaware game and you think, wow, okay, they're on track. But again, that's a first-year FBS team. What do you think this defense really looks like?
I'm nervous right now about them.
Me too.
Yeah, that's part of the reason why I'm nervous about the season in general, because I thought they would be a defensive-led group this year that was going to win games on that side of the football. Now, they were successful in limiting Delaware's points, but Delaware gashed them all over the field.
Yep.
They allowed the first 300-yard passer to Delaware's backup quarterback since the Stanford game, where they blew the 29-0 lead in Coach Prime's first year, which is alarming. At the end of the game, you look up, the kids got over 300 passing yards. You're like, oh, geez, that should not happen here. And even in the running game, their starter averaged almost 4.5 yards per carry. I just don't think it was that much better than it was against Georgia Tech. They know that. Coach Prime, I heard him yesterday on the Coach's Show acknowledge as much. He's much more honest with Mark Johnson than he is with us on Tuesdays. But yeah, I know he feels that way because he's got eyes and he's a smart guy and he can see it too. I'm worried, quite frankly, not as much tomorrow, even though I think that Houston does some interesting things. Like Connor Wigman's a good quarterback. He can throw it and he can actually run it. He's maybe not known for running a football, but he can get it done. He's a bit of a bigger body like Haynes King was the first week they faced in Georgia Tech. And the running back in Dean Connors, he can motor, man. He's a good little back. So they have a nice test here to start conference play. It's their most winnable conference game. I think we're going to learn a lot about what this defense can do on Friday. But I will say that this was a group last year that got better throughout the course of the year and had some setbacks. Unfortunately, they don't have a lot of the playmakers they did from last year. And I'm not sure that the quality depth that we thought may have existed in just a few spots is as good as it was. So I anticipate a couple games for them to get absolutely gashed in conference play. The saving grace for them this year, Shawn, is I don't think the Big 12 is very good either. So outside of the 3-game stretch, TCU, was it Iowa State, and then I can't for this off the top of my head, I can't think of who's on the other side of that. But there's a tough stretch. It's going to be a challenge, right? They've got to get better cornerback play out of McKinney and Hodge, who I did not think played well against Delaware, and those are your 2 defensive leaders. Like, that's where you start. Up front, defensive line, I could see that group getting better because there's a lot of seniors, although it is interesting that Brandon Davis-Swain is getting the start over a guy like an Amari McNeil, who won Big 12 Defensive Player of the Week after the Texas Tech game last year. Like, he's a redshirt freshman. I think he might be the only freshman D tackle in the Big 12 right now that's playing, quite frankly. So that's good to see that there is a little bit of development taking place and there is some youth that you can rely on and get some experience this year. So even if it may not be, the banner year that you're going to hang up, in the rafters there in the practice facility, you're going to get something out of this year. So I think I'm concerned about linebacker. I'm concerned about safety. That hasn't changed since preseason. And I don't know how much better they're going to get.
Yeah, the numbers are pretty scary right off the top. I mean, it's only a couple weeks in, I get that, but at the FBS rankings, the Buffs 94th against the pass, 122nd against the rush, leading to 116th overall, giving up 430 yards per game. The only thing that makes it look better than it is, of course, is the 17 points a game that they've allowed. But the funny thing is that still puts them 59th in the FBS. So it is nowhere near an elite defense. The advantage the Buffs have had in this season, the early going, is they are fourth in the FBS in turnover margin because they're +5, which otherwise, who knows what we're talking about with this team. I think Martavius French has been one of the terrific additions to the defense. He is everywhere. And I'm with you. I kind of shudder to think without a guy like French who's been kind of hoovering up tackles left and right, how bad this really could have gone. And against a Houston team, yeah, that's my biggest concern is because this team hold Houston under 27 points right now, at least today, based on what I've seen in these previous two. I have a tough time thinking they will.
Yeah, I think it's going to be right around 24, 27. I don't think this game's going to be too high scoring. If for some reason Houston pops off on them, it's going to be like a 50 alarm fire for the rest of the year. If Houston puts up like 35 against their defense, then you're going to go, oh boy.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's going to happen. And I do anticipate them to get better as they start to learn more and more about what they have. A lot of these guys really, as far as major contributors, didn't get that type of opportunity. And I would say that is probably so far the most disappointing element of the team. And you bring up the turnovers. If Georgia Tech doesn't play hot potato in the first quarter, that number looks worse. And there's no metric you can point to. So it wasn't like they two of those three weren't even caused by them for the most part in the first quarter. So yeah, Shawn, I'm worried, man. I am, because right now I think you're looking at a very average group defensively and that I think has some potential to get better. And you're looking at a very average offense unless some quarterback really takes command of it. And what do you have? You have an average football team, which is what I think they are right now. And until they get much better, that's how I see them.
You talked about the idea with Staub and that they're just going to start and play who they think is going to be the most effective. I think that's interested in the running game as well, where I think in the first two games, going back through my notes, I thought Simeon Price was their best runner in both games at this point. Hopefully he gets a little more carries, 14 carries, 84 yards. That's a 6 per. He can run on the inside. He can get him on the outside. I thought Price has been the best runner they've had, and hopefully you'll see a little bit more of that. And then, of course, we see the debut of Sincere Brown showing up in this Delaware game, now leading the team in receptions. But they also got a little something going with DeKalon Taylor, getting him involved in the passing game against Delaware. It feels like if this offense is going to really get cooking, and if Staub's going to be the guy in charge of it, I can envision, with the line being what it is, if Staub is going to have a pretty quick trigger, be pretty decisive, and go ahead and look at option one, look at option two, check it down to potentially Taylor, and then maybe get Adkins involved a little bit in the tight end role, where I think, I noted that he was someone that stood out to me at the Black and Gold game, got a little activity in Delaware. I could see how the offense could take a leap under Staub, and I can see why they're moving it, because I can see how those changes could be more effective under Staub than they would be under Salter, moving around as much as he does.
Really well said. And I think that's what it boils down to, buddy. Like, I think when you look at where Colorado's potential to win games is this year, I think we all thought, okay, maybe it could be defensively, but I think in short order, we're realizing that that's probably not going to be the case, and that it's actually might be easier to score more points if you can just be consistent at the quarterback position. Because right now, Coach Prime doesn't know what he's going to get out of Caden Salter, and you're right. Zach Adkins needs to be more involved. He's a matchup nightmare at the college level with, being big, fast, and strong at the tight end position. They need to get him more touches. I'm thinking at least 5 per game. You talked about the running back room. The one good news offensively for them is that Dallin Hayden, who is their starting running back entering this season. He missed the first 2 weeks because I think he broke his hand in training camp, had some surgery, and looks like he's going to get back into the rotation on Friday, which will be good. But I agree with you. Simeon Price was a guy who in 4 years of college had 300 yards rushing total. My expectations for him were basically nil when they grabbed him out of the portal. He was sitting in the portal for 6 months before they found him this summer. And man, I agree with you. I think he's been their most powerful runner. I think he's been their most explosive runner. Now, DeKalen Taylor's going to be more of an all-purpose guy. And for them, I think what you saw last week out of Taylor, around 100 all-purpose yards, that's a really good goal every week. He's not going to be a guy that leads you in rushing. He's not going to be a every down back. But what he can be is a good weapon for you. And if you can find a way to have that target for him around 100 all-purpose yards, then I think it's a really good step forward, especially if you can do that in conference play. However, now that the secret's out on him, teams are going to be keying on him. And I heard they were talking about, Marshall Faulk was talking about that this week, how they even Delaware started to key on him. And when that happens, it only gets harder and harder and harder, especially at that size. You've got to get more creative. And the truth here is this year comes down to out-coaching your opponent, I think, because you don't have the talent to out-talent them. And we're going to find out how well they're able to do that, which I think a lot of people still question, which is why nationally headed in, it was, can you win without Shedeur and Travis? And I think that is a question that is still very much up in the air and doesn't look great right now, if I'm being frank.
Well, I mean, if you look at the coaching, particularly, I do like what you brought up, Marshall Faulk. I do like what we've seen thus far in his first effort at this with the running backs. I think the appearance by Taylor, who is trying to play a Marshall Faulk light type of role. Obviously not that powerful a runner, but you can move him all over the field. There's some similarities there. And the fact that Simeon Price is overperforming, I think that Faulk probably deserves a little bit of credit for that too, for seeing something that maybe someone else didn't. But you're right. And when you look at the offensive coordinator role in Pat Shurmur, we've talked about that. We thought that Robert Livingston as the defensive coordinator was sort of quietly one of the MVPs of the team last year, but we're also now seeing that so far it hasn't been so good defensively. The last question, I guess, and let's go back to the end of that Georgia Tech game, because this would be something that I still wonder about when I talk about coaching these games and deciding this. Clock management is a still clear and present problem for the Colorado Buffaloes, whether it's getting plays in on time with regularity, whether it's in handling timeouts in late game situations, whether it's in other late game clock management situations. If it would just one of those things we look at it last week against Georgia Tech and go, okay, whatever that happens. But all of these clock management issues have been present in the entire time that Deion Sanders, the coach prime, has been the coach of the Buffaloes. You would expect that to start to get better. But in that Georgia Tech game, once again, a failure to use timeouts, at the very least, cost them a better opportunity to win the game, might have even cost them the game. And so when you look at this, why isn't that getting better? And how much is that a concern going forward for you?
It's not, if I'm being honest. Like, I understand what you're saying. It definitely cost them some time. I don't think the football guys were going to let them win that game
It
anyway.
did feel like it, but I think if you could have called that timeout at 51 seconds, not let 29 seconds burn off the clock.
After second down, I agree with you.
Yeah,
They should have
given the
called
fact that
timeout.
the defense was going to play back, you would probably be able to get to the 25-yard line or so. And instead of throwing some Hail Mary, you could actually call a play or two that might give you a better chance of success. And the Buffs just kind of chose not to do that. And then when you look at evaluating someone like Caden Salter, that comes into part of that equation too. And I don't know how much of that is him, because we've seen this no matter what. But it's not a concern to you at this point.
I think it's going to be interesting to see if there's enough close games to where that will matter. And not having Shedeur out there with that natural ability in the late game situations to understand where the clock is at, understand what's being asked. But this is a Coach Prime thing. He's going to go off of feel and he's going to go off of his gut. And I think there were times last year where that was a question. And I do think he got better throughout the course of the season. Having to be in that situation in week one with as many new moving parts as there were was a big challenge for them, and they didn't meet it head on. It's also, again, maybe they come down to a lot of one-score games. I don't think they're going to be in a ton of those. I think that they'll be in some. But as far as the rest of conference play goes, right now, I think they're going to be lucky to be in those positions. So I'm a little bit more worried about everything else because I think you've got to get everything else right. Because I don't think, from a strategic standpoint, they're going to out X's and O's anyone. So that's kind of where I'm at. It's more about an execution thing for me. I get it. What are you supposed to say in this moment? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Um, I don't know again that it's on my list of like top 5 priorities because I thought, yeah, he could have used another timeout, but the truth is like they need players who can make those plays more than they need a coach who's going to be able to manage that clock. And I'm worried that they don't have the players that are going to be able to make those plays right now.
When you look at this game against Houston, what do you expect to see? What do you hope to see? And what would you see that would make you cringe a little bit?
I expect to see a tight one. This is, like I said, I think their most winnable conference game. So down the line, I've got some of those concerns. But right now, this is one where you got to find a way to get it across the finish line. The way I look at it is separating from Coach Prime's standard and his expectation. This is not a better team than it was last year. There is no argument that you can possibly make to justify that claim. So I'm kind of done hearing that. That's number one. This is a team that has to get to 6 come hell or high water, however it works, right?
Yeah.
Hidden ball, I don't care. Hidden ball trick, you know what I mean? Anything you can pull out of the back of the closet, the old flea flicker, the wide receiver pass. I mean, any of that stuff. Find a way to get to 6 wins, and to me, that's a very good year considering what you lost last year. And I think we're in the infancy stages of what rebuilding teams through the transfer portal really looks like. Coach Prime was truthfully the innovator in that, right? 3 years ago, everybody was writing articles. How could he possibly let all these kids go? And how rude. But it's not always going to work. And I think against Houston, I'm looking for a team that can execute more consistently offensively. I'm looking for Ryan Staub to be comfortable if he does, in fact, get the start, which I believe he will. And I'm looking for a team that can push for 30. Like, I think 1st to 27 probably gets the job done down in Houston tomorrow night. So what would make me cringe? Having to pull them in the first half, because then I think they're in a really bad spot the rest of the year. I think if he's so uncomfortable, which I don't anticipate him to be. When he got the start 2 years ago at Utah, he actually looked really comfortable. And I thought he should have won the game if they don't wipe off 2 Travis Hunter touchdowns in the first half. I mean, that's a 23-17 final on the road in a place. Now Utah was playing a lot of their backups, but that's a house of horrors. Rice Eccles is normally for CU. So I was impressed. I have enough confidence in him where if I were Coach Prime, I would start Ryan Staub. So I need to see a guy that does not look panicked, that looks comfortable, and that looks like he can consistently execute. What would make me cringe is, again, him getting pulled in the first half, because if they have to go away from him in the first game that they went to him, I think all bets are off for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. You'd like to at least see him finish the game. And I think there is something to it. I understand it's a transfer portal world and teams are year-to-year propositions at this point, but it appeared evident to me in the game against Delaware that teammates, offensive linemen, felt more comfortable with Staub there in the huddle, in part because in certain cases he's been around them more. It's just that simple. So this idea that you can always microwave the chemistry year after year. Look, in today's college football, as it stands today, you're going to have to do that every single year. You're going to have to try to microwave chemistry. But maybe this is proof positive that it doesn't work at every position. Sometimes you have to have one season built upon another, which then makes it interesting to see how the Julian Lewis situation continues to go. Because if he's the guy, even if he's not the starter all year, if he's the guy that's been around like Staub for a year, next year that chemistry will be better by default with those guys. And then you might be able to hit the ground running and make a big leap. But it's a fascinating time to watch the Buffs. It was absolutely a transition year. And Matt, you're absolutely right for calling out the idea that it is silly to say on the surface at any point. I get that at certain positions the team is deeper. I get that probably overall the team is deeper. That should happen in the third year of doing this. But to say it is better or to say its ceiling is higher than the one last year, get out of here. I get the foundation part of it, and I am not discounting how important it is to have valuable depth and better foundational pieces. But top-end talent often defines where you're going. This team doesn't have it anywhere near. It has in the last couple of years. That's always been silly. It's always been talk for media and fans. It's not real. Never was.
Never was. And again, I actually think it was for Coach Prime. So I think he's going through a bit of a wake-up call right now, which is obviously a little bit of a concern in talent evaluation, but he knows what they have. Once they hit the field, I think he understood. I haven't heard that lately. So I think that got put away. But yeah, man, you also have to remember that Ryan Staub's got 2 more years left at Colorado if he wants them.
Yes.
And if Julian's not ready next year, they're not going to give him the keys. They will not do that. Now, I think there's a chance he will be much more comfortable and much further along in the process, and it's on them to develop him there. But if you're going to be average this year, do you want it to be with a 1-year rental who's going to be gonzo, or are you going to try and get something out of this year and try and develop a quarterback? And I'll tell you what, how good does Coach Prime look if Staub comes in and plays well and has a solid season? Coach Prime looks really good, as in like he can develop a quarterback, and look at the way the team rallied around him. And you were there, same as I was. The entire operation was smoother. It just was smoother. And he understood more of what Pat Shurmur was asking of him. And I think if you're going to rock with Pat Shurmur, which they are, which again, I wouldn't advocate to make a change this early or anything like that. I just think you've got to maximize on that. And right now, for many different reasons, I think that clear option is Ryan Staub.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I mean, I said that at the end of the last game as well. Like, look, you have to start him. Given the performance, you have to start him. It's bad luck for Caden Salter. It's a bad break for Caden Salter. I think you put it very, very well. He did not lose the job, but Ryan Staub's performance, even in that brief cameo, was so strong that you have no choice but to start him and find out if what happened is sustainable. I suspect that'll happen too, and obviously we'll have a lot to discuss one way or the other, whether he does or whether he doesn't make it look sustainable after this game in Houston on Friday. As always, the Sko Show brought to you by our friends at Peckish. Remember, 2 locations in the Denver Tech Center, Bellevue Station, just off of I-25, and then the brand new expanded location on the hill in Boulder, 3 times the size of the original, but still all the TVs, game audio, lots of different places to sit and see that you didn't have before. So a great place to catch the game. And there's happy hour 7 days a week, 3 to 6, $3 slices of pizza, discounted beer and spirits, lunch specials, by the way, every day starting at $10. Find that nowadays just about anywhere. Preferred dining partners of CU Athletics. And by the way, I probably don't have to tell you, wings, pizza, and beer go pretty well with football. So if you haven't had a chance to check out Peckish at either of its locations, you absolutely should. Also follow Matt for all of the latest. Matt is so plugged into the program, done such a great job breaking it down over the years, both at outlets and even on his own. So, I mean, you want to make sure that you pay attention to Matt because we're catching you right before you go catch a flight.
Yeah, I'm on my way to Houston later tonight. Yeah.
Right. So make sure you check Matt out for everything that you can follow for the bus. Always good to talk to you, my friend. Thanks so much for joining me today.
All right, buddy. We'll talk to you next week.
All right. Thanks so much for everyone at Mile High Sports and all of our friends at Peckish bringing you the Sko Show. We say the same thing every time out. And thanks for watching. And Sko Buffs.